Hello, friends. Blessings to you. I'm glad that you're a part of today's program of IgnitedChurchLife.com and the Prophetic Worldview. I have a very special guest for an encore, part two, Andy Schectman from MilesFranklin.com. Andy, welcome back.
Good to see you again. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very, very much.
Absolutely, man. I've got some great reports from the last time we talked and got together. Just people just blown away. Told me they've listened 3, 4, 5 times, just trying to get all the information, because it definitely was a plethora of information. But that's the world we're living in. I mean, we're getting bombarded, aren't we?
Yeah, it's one of the things, Benjamin, that I find the most. I don't even know what the adjective is. I could, first thing that popped in my head was concerning and then illuminating. I mean, I don't know what the right adjective is, but what I will tell you is I've been a big fan of the term logarithmic decay for quite some time. I think it fits so well when we talk about economics, or even what's happening in this country socially, morally, economically. It's when they asked Ernest Hemingway how he went broke, he said little by little and then all at once. And I think that's very apropos when we discuss the things that have happened. Let's use like censorship as an example. In 2020, little by little, we kept hearing, you can't say that, you'll be delisted, they'll take you off YouTube. Little by little, by little, by little, and bang, it's like everywhere, it's all around us. Censorship is just now normal, and the subversion of the First Amendment is something that it really troubles me. And this is a greater theory, I guess you could say, that I have as part of a bigger picture. But when we talk about things that are happening around the world, it just seems little by little by little by little by little, the things are increasing. And what does that all at once moment look like? And that's something I've been trying to figure out now for the last few years. But I would agree with you, the acceleration in the daily events, things that would have been, stopped the world years ago, now are happening daily, and we just look past them as part of the fabric of today's society. So to me, it's very concerning on multiple levels, whether you're talking the acceleration of war, or the acceleration of divisiveness in this country, or the acceleration of the demise of the dollar via de-dollarization, or the rise of the BRICS, or the acceleration of all of these things around us that we are seeing, the increase of people coming in illegally, little by little by little by little. And then what does that all at once moment look like? What does the all at once moment look like when we talk about, what's happening here with socially, with cancel culture, with the nuclear family, all of these things that are little by little by little starting to be broken apart. These are the things that I find to be very, very much part of the exact same equation. Just depends how you look at it and how you put it all together. But you're right, it is accelerating for sure.
Yeah, and from a pastor's point of view, I look at things. I think a lot of people are just not paying attention because we're getting bombarded. This rapid fire of events taking place. I just feel like, Andy, there's the left hand doing something with the right hand, and the right's doing something. We're not seeing it. And I keep telling my wife, I said, I feel like we're in a moment of musical chairs with the economy. And what I'm afraid is the music's going to stop and folks are not going to be ready. I can handle a thievery. I can handle a fire. I can handle certain things in life, right? We have insurance for that. We have protection for that. But when it comes to the US dollar and money, we're so blinded, as you know, to this, that, it can't happen here, that it's going to slap so many people. So what's your take on all that? And where do you see us now, since it's been a couple of weeks we got together? Things aren't any better, are they?
No, in fact, I would argue they're getting much worse. Jamie Dimon, the leader of the largest bank in the United States, when you talk about people not having no idea, he says, look, central banks have been 100% dead wrong on forecasts for the past 18 months.
Wow.
That's the leader of the largest bank in the United States. And when he says central banks, that means the Federal Reserve as well. And their policies are dead wrong. And they've been wrong in speaking about inflation, which wasn't there, and then it was transitory, then it was structural, then it was gone, then it's reemerged. I mean, everything that they talk about has been wrong. Go back to Bernanke saying the subprime crisis was contained, and a few days later, boom, it wasn't. They're wrong. And I think people are listening to the mainstream narrative and therefore are not able to get out of the way of what they don't see coming. You listen to what the Fed just said, however, and let's try and take them a little bit at their face value. On Friday, they said that escalating geopolitical tensions pose a significant threat to the global financial system. They said amid heightened risks of higher inflation and slower growth, I thought inflation was under control and a soft landing was in the works. They said that the potential for broad adverse spillovers in the global markets and the Middle East conflict and the Ukraine intensify is becoming greater, and that these geopolitical tensions pose important risks to the global economic activity and carry highly uncertain implications. They use all of these big adjectives, and he also said that they warned of increased market volatility and of an increased economic slowdown as credit dries up. All of these things are happening, but people don't understand exactly what he is saying. And I think what he is basically saying is get ready, it's coming. I think a slowdown of that magnitude would pose a tremendous threat to the commercial real estate market in particular, where it may set off the fuse, leading to significant losses for a range of financial institutions with very sizable exposures, including regional and community banks and the insurance companies. One of the things that we haven't talked about a lot is the insurance companies. And now we hear that the insurance companies are something that is an area in which the Federal Reserve is concerned about right now, in the fact that these insurance companies are also putting their money into treasuries and securities. And their comment was life insurers continue to face liquidity risk owing to heavy reliance on non-traditional liabilities in combination with an increasing share of illiquid and risky assets on their balance sheets. Well, illiquid and risky, they're talking treasuries that have lost half their value. Wow. And so when you see the ramifications of higher rates and of over leverage and under capitalized markets and institutions, it really becomes real. And we see this massively inverted yield curve that we've had for several months now, where you're getting paid a higher rate of return on short-term treasuries than you are on long-term treasuries. That's inverted. The longer out you lend money, the higher the return it should be. Well, that's not what's happened. You're getting much higher short-term than you are long-term. And that's because the bond traders feel that the economy will get so bad that the Fed will have to come in and pivot and lower rates again and reaccommodate, inflate, if you will. And so when you see the uninversion of the market generally, if you go back to 1950, anytime you see an inverted yield curve, it portrays a recession. Now, we know they changed the metrics by which they label a recession. We probably already are in one or have been for a while, but let's just play by their rules for a minute. And anytime you see a yield curve that uninverts, it's typically right at the time since 1950 where we see a recession. But the uninverting comes as the Fed typically comes in and lowers short-term rates to stimulate borrowing and to stimulate the economy. Well, that's not happening this time. In fact, they're raising short-term rates. Short-term rates are going higher. It's the long end of the bond market that is rising. And that's much scarier, right? The 10-year treasury just hit 5% for the first time in 16 years. And why is that scarier? Wow. Is that what I think you're beginning to see, or maybe it's the fact that the Federal Reserve is beginning to understand, is that the market in and of itself has much more strength, clout, and power than does any central bank. And the markets are basically saying, look, we've had enough of your never-ending debt. We've had enough of your expansion of debt in this reckless manner, and we don't want your bonds anymore. And so I think they're realizing that the market is stronger than the bank. And so you're going to see yields rise until they meet demand. on the back end of the bond market. And there'll always be demand, but the question is at what rate and what yields will it take to bring those buyers into the fold as China and Japan and Saudi Arabia, these big buyers of our treasuries, including the Federal Reserve, who's quantitatively tightening, meaning they're selling bonds. Who's going to buy them? Who's going to buy those bonds? So rates are rising, which puts greater and greater and greater and greater and greater and greater strain on the banks, which are undercapitalized, holding 10-year treasuries, that as rates go higher and higher and higher, they become worth less and less and less and less. You have Moody's and S&P downgrading the banks. One bank fails, the next one fails, will be bailed in. And that is the law. That's the thing that I think will be the real catalyst here, is that people don't know what a bail-in is. And it was written into law during the Dodd-Frank Act. This is why there was such outrage when Silicon and Signature were bailed out. Should have never happened. Janet said they were too systemic. They had to be bailed out, but they will be bailed in next time. That's the law, meaning you lose everything over the 250 FDIC limit, which is a scam anyway, because FDIC has 128 billion in assets backing 18 trillion in deposits. It's not really backing. But let's just pretend that they make whole anything over 250. It's gone. You're bailed in. You are an unsecured general creditor of the bank, and that is when the craziness in this country starts, as everyone runs to pull their money out of what is a undercapitalized, over-leveraged banking system, that when they do that, it just starts to collapse more banks. And as the banks have to sell their treasuries to meet redemption demands, because remember, these banks, if they're well capitalized, maybe have 3 or 4% capital on hand. In other words, 100% of their money, they have 3 or 4% on hand. The rest is invested in things like treasuries, most of which they bought over the last several years when interest rates were 0 and 1% on the federal funds rate. Their 10-year treasuries are completely insolvent. We have almost $1 trillion in unrealized losses in these banks. And as the commercial real estate market gets worse, and as more and more people run to pull their money out of the banking system, especially after that first bailing, it's over. They'll yank their money out, which means they have to sell their treasuries, which means rates go higher and higher and higher, which puts more strain on the banks. More people yank their money out, more banks fail, more treasuries sold. It's a doom loop. There's no way out of this problem. I think it's incentivized. This is what the big money wants, what the government wants. They want to reset the system, and it's going to start with the banks.
Man, I'm so glad you went back over bail-ins, because that's in my notes right here, because people just, I still don't believe they get it. That first of all, it can't happen here in America. It's not going to happen to me. That's the other guy. That happened over, in Germany a long time ago, and it's not here.
Right.
We're safe. I mean, I don't know how loud you have to scream this for people to recognize or realize, they're going to rob the people out of the piggy bank, if you will. They already are.
And I think what they're looking for really is a villain. Who's the villain?
Right.
The villain that has done all of this to us would be Putin and Xi Jinping and OPEC. And the moves that are being made to lose the world reserve status fits part and parcel with the lead economic advisor of this country, who Jared Bernstein, who has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work, and he's the lead economic advisor to the Biden administration, who advocates for the immediate removal of the world reserve status. And by weaponizing the dollar and telling Saudi Arabia, hey, we're going green, even though they are the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, because they, through OPEC, value oil globally in dollars. They don't need to do that anymore, because we're going green, and they've joined the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the New Development Bank, and has told everyone in Davos that they're open to taking new currencies for oil. And along with every other OPEC countries on the Belt Road Initiative, the largest infrastructure project in human history, the US is not part of. It would be very plausible, especially what's happening in the Middle East and the Straits of Hormuz, and the very, very high probability we see much higher oil prices. And maybe because we're just not synced up with Saudi Arabia anymore, they say, hey, thanks for the memories, guys, but we're going a different direction. You signed an executive order to be fully green by 2050, but majority green by 2030. So we're going to take oil in other currencies. And like that, every country on the planet that's had dollars stockpiled to buy oil will sell them. That creates hyperinflation as those dollars race towards our shores. That's the Klaus Schwab moment. where you will own nothing and rent and be happy, because that hyperinflation is inversely correlated to stocks, bonds, and real estate, because the byproduct of hyperinflation is a spike in interest rates to compensate for the loss of purchasing power. If you have 30% inflation, you can't have 5% interest rates. You might as well use your dollar bills as toilet paper.
Right.
The dollars have to, the interest has to rise commensurate to meet the decrease in value through inflation. So if 30% inflation, you better have 30% interest rates. Well, right now, they lie about the inflation metric. The CPI should be called the CPI, excludes food, energy, and housing. And if we measure it the way it used to be measured prior to these revisions, we're already double-digit inflation. But let's, even using their metric, which is flawed, the rate of interest is still below their flawed rate of inflation. Now, you could argue that month over month, that maybe you're slightly positive using their numbers. But if we took the real inflation numbers, let's go back to 1980. How did Paul Volcker stop inflation? He raised interest rates above inflation. You had inflation at 16%. He raised interest rates to 18.75%. Bang, inflation's dead. That's the only way to do it. But when you raise rates that high in an environment that has, number one, suppress interest rates for so long, creating massive distortions, we incentivize everyone to take on debt, whether it be the household buying a bigger house or 2 more cars than they should have, or the corporations that, well, we'll hire 50 more people and build a wing onto the building and open a new division, or our government, who has racked up in 2023 the third highest deficit in history, only third to the first and second being 2021 and 22 during COVID spending. So we have a government addicted to spending, inflation that's roaring, the metrics by which we gauge inflation blurred. So yeah, I mean, people don't really see the problem just yet because the information that we're being given is flawed. But if you want to really get rid of inflation, you have to raise rates high enough. So in an environment where we have hyperinflation, as the world dumps dollars, the only way to solve that problem is to jack interest rates up. And this is where I think the Federal Reserve is realizing that they are not as powerful as the market. At what point does the world say, listen, you're doing nothing but destroy the value of your dollar. You're not going to normalize your balance sheet ever. You continue to run massive deficits. You continue to police the world in a manner that is losing effectiveness. And you know what? We've decided we don't want your bonds anymore. And keep raising rates, keep going. Maybe we'll think about it, keep going. Well, when that happens, the raising of rates will destroy the stock market, the bond market, and the real estate market. What would 20% interest rates do on 30-year mortgages? Look what's happening at 8%.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so this is an environment where the higher the rates go, everything collapses in that environment. So we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. We're in trouble. And I hate to say it, but we are. And this is of our own making. And I believe they're trying to find a villain to lose the liability that should be squarely put on their head. And that villain is primarily, Putin and Xi Jinping and OPEC. And that's the road we're heading down.
Yeah. Yeah. And war in the Middle East would really help solve a lot of that, besides what's going on in Europe, because they never want to take the blame, because they know if the American people really knew what was going on, they just burn the place down.
Yeah. When all else fails, take them to war.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's happening right here. You're mentioning a flawed information. In my research before getting with you, I'm reading these propaganda pieces that are saying, the economy is stronger than it has ever been. And, on and on it's going. And I'm just like, are you serious? Who's writing this information? And then I read another article that says that, the dollar is like half its value of 2020 when you're considering buying a house. So I'm like, there's these messages hitting the American people, and it's almost like, who do you believe and who do you read?
Right.
Is that right? I mean,
yeah, you're right. As far as the house is concerned, for sure.
yeah.
I read the same report that it now takes $114,000 annual income to afford a typical house. That's up 90% from 2020, which you needed a $60,000 a year job. So you have interest rates that have gone up. You had house prices that have gone up. You have a market that is just ridiculous. You have governmental spending as what, 30-40% of GDP right now. So the government, instead of that money being spent by the private sector, which is more effective. You have the government with its horrible efficiency spending all of this money and giving all of this stimulus away. That represents a portion of the GDP. This economy is in horrible condition. We have 65% of this country living paycheck to paycheck, 45% of the country who earns over 100,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck. We have record credit card debt at 17 trillion. We have record mortgage debt. We have record student debt right now at 1.6 trillion, what the government in some perverse manner calls the largest asset on the United States government balance sheet. Google it. What is the largest asset of the US government? Student debt. Go figure that one out. And so when you talk about record student debt, record mortgage debt, record consumer debt, record government debt, record auto debt, at a time when you have virtually nothing in the way of savings per capita in this country, and most of the country living paycheck to paycheck, in an environment where we've lost unity. We're not a unified country anymore. And then when you go back throughout history, when we have risen to the challenge of whatever it is that pinned our back to the wall, we were unified. We believed in God. We believed in the nuclear family. We believed in respecting authority. And those things are gone. And that to me is more disturbing than anything. And I think that we are not in a position to fight back against this adversity that's coming. And you know, when you look at what's happening around the world, we see I think a growing coalition of countries that are realizing that there is a change afoot, and they are uniting with the majority of humanity that is moving against the Western interests.
Yeah, and I'm listening to you, and I can't help but think this, Andy, and correct me if I'm wrong. This reset is their answer. Just let everything go to hell, if you will. Let it go to pot, as they would say. You know, as much debt as you want. It doesn't matter. We're going to reset this whole thing. Debt cancellation. Wow, what a jubilee. What a utopia day. I feel that that's the way they're going to sell it to us, because there's so much negativity concerning the economy. We're going to be thankful to get out of this house that's on fire. Do you think that's, I mean, obviously that's the end goal, is a reset, but do you feel that too?
Yeah, I think, but it's different than most people think. This Nasara, Jasara, whatever, where everyone's debt is forgiven. No, because remember, someone's debt is someone else's asset.
Exactly.
But when you talk about the debt burden, right? So first of all, who's buying all the bonds right now? It's the US public, as Russia and China and Saudi Arabia and India, they're all dumping Japan, they're all dumping treasuries, all of them.
Right.
And at the same time, the US market is pulling their money out of the banks, making the banks unstable, and going directly into US treasuries. So the US populace owns a large percentage of the treasury market, but where else is the debt owed to? Well, we've got Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and government military pensions. Those amount to $130 trillion. They're off balance sheet, owed to the American public. And, you know, when you talk about the national debt, yes, some of it is owed to foreigners, but the majority of all of our indebtedness is owed to the American public. So how do you get people to take a new central bank digital currency? You know, the Bank of International Settlements have done two things to me that in many ways is shaping my career. One, in April of 2019, they revalued gold as the world's only other tier one asset, the only other one, next to US dollars and treasuries. This would explain why the central banks are on a voracious buying spree and repatriation spree, and have been for a few years now, using the suppression of the Western paper market to achieve this repositioning. And the second thing that they did is they told every country, and right now, of the countries that comprise 95% of the gross domestic product in the world, every single one of them has a central bank digital currency in development or operation, the United States included. And so, you know, Biden signed an executive order fast tracking the central bank digital currency. The number 2 economic advisor to the US government is Lael Brainerd, modern monetary theorist, worked at the Treasury, worked at the Fed, worked with MIT when she was at the Fed in development of the new CBDC, ran point on Fed Now, which just came out last month. Fed Now, everyone will know what that is soon. Probably most of you don't. That is the Fed's version of Venmo and Zelle. It will take the place of checks like that. It will take the place of wires. It will be commonplace within a year. It is instant settlement using the FedNow network. It is the appetizer before the central bank digital currency main course. But how do you get people to take a central bank digital currency, which could, by all measurements, all your privacy is gone. You play in a golf match with your buddies and lose $6 to your best friend. That's now on the ledger.
Yeah.
Or you're playing poker with your friends and you win $12 from your buddies. That's now on the ledger. Or you decide to go buy a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of Jack Daniels. That's on the ledger. They will have a profile on you in 10 seconds. And the new patents that Bill Gates has, where he's combining the digital ID 2020 with your health records and your financial records. He has a patent on that.
Wow.
You weren't vaccinated, so how are you going to buy that gasoline? You shouldn't be out of your house. What are you doing? The authorities will be called. The ability to track and to control will be something the large portion of the country will want to push back against, right? So in that environment, how do you get people to accept it? Well, you create an event where there's a villain. That villain is OPEC and Xi Jinping and Putin. How could they do this to us? How could they dump dollars? Why did they dump dollars? Well, the lead economic advisor says we should lose the world reserve currency. So we weaponize the dollar against Russia. We told Saudi Arabia, which is the linchpin to the dollar hegemony, hey, we're going green, but thanks anyway. And dollars get dumped. And you have this moment where hyperinflation ensues, interest rates spike, stocks, bonds, real estate, and the dollar collapse like that. It's that Klaus Schwab moment. Everyone loses everything, but have no fear because Lael Brainerd is here with her central bank digital currency. She is a modern monetary theorist. And who do we owe all the money to? To ourselves. So I'll tell you what, sign on the dotted line and take the central bank digital currency, which, go back to biblical times, what, mark of the beast. That's right. You'll be made whole. And you can go buy food tonight. And you don't have to worry that you just lost all of your wealth in your 401k and in your bank account, and your insurance company went bankrupt and all of these things. Well, don't worry. You'll be made whole with the new currency. You just have to take it. Okay, great. So an event whereby you can point to a villain, whereby everyone loses everything and rallies amongst a common enemy and start over a new system. Sure, I could see it happening. Not the way that a lot of people think, well, we're just going to forgive debt. No, there will have to be some horrible event that makes people beg to take the CBDC, because as it is, everyone I talk to every day says, I ain't taking that thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's definitely not going to be an eventless type of thing. I think we're watching it right now with everything happening with the wars. And I think the Middle East is just going to blow up. That's what it's looking like. When you have over 600,000 people, Americans getting ready to be evacuated, why would you even signal something like that, from our government if they weren't in the plans or something was coming up that's pretty huge? So, World War III, it's here. I mean, there's too much coming at us, too many convergences. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a nice, easy reset for sure. But again, Andy, I don't think people are ready for it. It doesn't seem to be registering in people's minds what it's going to look like to lose it all.
No, and why would it? They're not being told this.
Right.
They're being kept in the dark largely from a media that won't tell the truth and instead is fixated on, Donald Trump and the things that really are inconsequential. And so, there's an old saying, you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. People suffer from recency bias. People suffer from normalcy bias. But little by little, the dollar is being forsaken. And, whether you talk about, we'll talk about Brazil for a moment as an example. They're the second largest exporter of corn in the world. They signed a deal with China to sell all of their corn and payable, what used to be in dollars now will be accepted for in yuan. The farmers around the country who sell soybeans to China have realized a 40% decrease in sales this year because now China is buying soybeans directly from Brazil and paying for it in yuan instead of dollars. And
Mm.
so you're little by little by little by little, we were seeing erosion in the settlement of dollars. And that was the deal that the folks at the BRICS meeting in August said, listen, right now we're going to settle in local currencies, and then we'll come back next year. The finance ministers are tasked with finding a solution to bring a common settlement currency that will come. It will be pegged to gold. But they're doing things methodically in the right way. Until then, they're trading amongst themselves in yuan and ruble and rupee and all of these other currencies. Even some of our allies, like France, making a massive liquid natural gas deal with United Arab Emirates, paid for it in yuan, and that was after signing a 50-point trade agreement treaty with China, ranging from 5G technology to military engagement. Sides are being chosen. And if you look, you see all of these deals that are going on and on and on and on and on that are not settling in dollars. China just did a 1.2 million, won a $1.2 billion contract to modernize Iran's largest airport. They're being paid in oil on the barter system, not in dollars. All of these things used to settle globally in dollars, and now they are not. Little by little by little, logarithmic decay, then bang, all at once, something happens like OPEC says, we're done. We don't want dollars anymore. And every country that has created this synthetic demand for the dollar by stockpiling them to purchase oil has no need to hold them anymore. What happens to the value of the dollar? It collapses. What happens to interest rates? It spikes. What happens to all of the assets in this country? They collapse. Who did this to us? They did, not us. It wasn't our stupid brain dead monetary policy. It was them. And now let's all start over because we all lost everything, and take the new CBDC, and here we go. That's that moment. And you go back 300 years, and Thomas Jefferson said something similar to Klaus Schwab. I'll paraphrase it. I won't get it exactly right. Klaus Schwab said, you'll owe nothing in rent and be happy. Thomas Jefferson said, if we give the money creation rights to a central bank, we will end up renting the land back that our forefathers conquered. And think about that. He said, first through inflation, then through deflation, we'll end up renting the land back that our forefathers conquered. Well, we've seen the inflation part. We've seen asset prices be blown up, where money creation has been more in the last 4 years than at any time in all of the United States history combined. The last 4 years, we printed more than all the years combined. And we've stepped on interest rates, making distortions in asset prices. So there's your inflation part. Now, how about deflation? The money supply is shrinking at the fastest rate ever because it's being sucked up by treasuries. So all of that money is leaving the banking system, going right to the treasury to buy treasuries, chasing yield. So the money supply is decreasing at a very fast rate. The liquidity is decreasing. The overnight repo market, which is the lifeblood for liquidity for a lot of corporations, is all going into treasuries and leaving the system. So the M2 money supply is draining at the fastest rate ever. This is what happens before a collapse. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the seeds have been sown for a massive collapse, rising rates, liquidity drying up completely and totally, and massive debt. And these are very, very bad omens that are all coming together at the same time, and yet people don't realize it. And I think it's going to be a scary, scary time. And it just seems that the decisions that our leaders are making are perfectly the wrong ones to make, that they are the exact opposite of what you should do if you wanted to right the ship. I'll give you an example. When Janet Yellen said, if we don't increase the debt ceiling, we will default. What did she say there? In essence, she said, we are a Ponzi scheme. What is a Ponzi scheme? Right. If you don't have more money coming in the door, you default. Ask Bernie Madoff if he were still alive. He would tell you, when money stopped coming in and redemptions started flowing in, he defaulted, right? He blew up. He went to prison. Well, what she should have said was, listen, we've made a lot of mistakes. We're still the best country in the world. But to my dear American people, we are going to need to make some very difficult decisions, starting with, we need to raise the retirement age to 75. We need to cancel entitlements. You have to be drug tested before you take food stamps and prove that you are really eligible for it. And on and on and on and on and on. We need to stop giving money around the world. We need to bring all of our military back home and close our military bases that are sucking dry our funds. We need to do all of these things in the self-interest of our country and to retain credibility in the world's eye. We need to tighten our belt and do it now. We need to stop spending so much because we took in record $4 trillion in 2 years, like 2 years ago, and the spending, or last year, and the spending was 5.5 trillion or 6 trillion. $2 trillion deficit. You go back to 2019 or 18, a couple of years before that, the amount of money that almost 5 trillion that we took in tax revenue would have left $500 billion in surplus to pay down the debt. Instead, we take in more and we spend more. The third most spending, third biggest deficit in history in 2023, only third to the COVID era. So the point of it is that what she should have said is, we're going to stop spending. It's going to get ugly here for a while, but we'll make it through this. We are going to unite against this problem. Let's all get together. Let's tighten our belts together. Instead, no, we need to borrow more. That's like saying, listen, I maxed all my credit cards out and calling American Express and say, listen, if you don't jack up my limit, I'm not going to be able to pay any of my bills. I'm going to go bankrupt. So jack it up and I'll make my minimum payments. It's just, it's moronic. And I think we're coming to the end of the ability to do this without consequences. And that's really something that we haven't really crossed that bridge ever in this country, but we're real darn close to doing that now, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely
not fun. I'm not the fun guy to talk to at the party. That's why, I don't talk this way.
Yeah.
With people in the community I live in. I live in a country club community in Florida. I don't talk this way. Yeah. People say, oh my gosh, I've seen your podcast. Wow. I'm not the guy that would get invited back to parties. I'm not the guy that anyone would ever want to sit with.
No.
But it's cathartic for me to talk to someone like you who gets it, to your listeners out there who are trying to get it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Most people don't want to hear this. That's why they don't see it coming. No. But it's like, I'm a big baseball fan, have been my whole life. And baseball's meant a very lot to me, both in playing it and playing softball all around North America into my 40s. And there was a pitcher named Randy Johnson, 6'11" Hall of Fame pitcher for the Seattle Mariners, left-hander, threw about 100 miles an hour. Mm. And there was a time where he threw a pitch and a poor unsuspecting pigeon flew by right as he let go of the ball. It blew up, literally exploded. And wow. I liken the majority of the American public to being in a batter's box with Randy Johnson being blindfolded. They have no idea what's being thrown at their head. They have no idea what's coming. Yeah. Yeah. And you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming. And that's the problem. So if you and I are helping open one or two individuals' eyes to, hey, this is all fact. The things that I'm citing are fact. Yes, I draw conclusions. I say, well, if the lead economic advisor wants to lose the reserve status and the other number two economic advisor is a modern monetary theorist, wants to get rid of the banks and go central bank digital currency, well, look at their actions. Is this what's going to happen? I put that together. But everything I say up until that point is factual. And Google me, fact check me. You'll see. Now, putting all of the dots together, well, that's something that I've been fairly successful at doing over the last few years. I hope I'm wrong, but what terrifies me is that I haven't been so far. And I guess, maybe I am, and we'll see. But I don't think that this is anything the American public has ever experienced, really. And will be worse than the Great Depression. Because at least after the Great Depression and World War II, we were a united country. And we believed in God, and we believed in the nuclear family. We believed in respecting authority, and we believed in things that made this country special. And those things are of an era gone by, sadly, it seems. Really, really bothers me, those things in particular. And I was reading something. I don't know if I jotted it down. Let me see if I did. Yeah, listen to this. This is kind of encapsulates it. Yeah. A recent startling poll shows that a majority of voters not only view the opposing party as a threat to the nation, but justifying violence to combat their agenda. The polls by the University of Virginia Center for Politics shows a nation at war with itself. 52% of Biden supporters say Republicans are now a threat to the American life, while 47% of Trump supporters say the same about the Democrats. Among Biden supporters, 41% now believe violence is justified to stop Republicans from achieving their goals. And an almost identical percentage, 38% of Trump supporters now embrace violence to stop Democrats. Faith is the one thing that no system of government can do without. Without faith in the underlying values of a constitutional system, authority rests on a mix of coercion and capitulation. Well, who the
Oh,
heck is going to have faith in our system when
yeah.
our country wants to kill each other?
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think you could say, the Communist Manifesto, what's number
Right.
one? Divide and
Please.
conquer. We're divided, and now we're
Okay.
just ready to be conquered. I hope I'm wrong.
No.
But this is why you own gold and silver. It is not an investment. It is not to get
Right.
wealthy. It represents historical wealth. You own enough of it, you'll be wealthy. Until
Right.
then, everything else, in my opinion, is just credit or debt. Gold is wealth, and that's why you own it, especially
Yeah.
in these times.
Yeah. That's well put. The Communist Manifesto. They're going to take over the nation without firing a shot. I mean, yeah, we've seen it. Yeah, that leads me into gold. I want to talk about that, and everything we talk about is, is you make a decision on all your finances. It's not any type of advice. I think it's something you should listen to for sure, and that's why I have you on, Andy, is because from a pastor's point of view, it's not even being talked about in pulpits. I mean, everything's happy, candy cane, holding hands, lollipop, whatever, and not telling the facts. And I think when you don't tell people the facts, then they can get real hurt. And my job is not for anybody to be hurt. But you said many, many times you can't get out of the way of something that you can't see coming. How do we get out of the way then? We're going to lead into gold and silver for sure, because I have some questions about that. But if you were standing right now at the White House at the podium, you're the president of the United States, Andy Schectman, what would you say to the nation to get out of the way? What do we do?
You can't. I mean, he can't say to the public, you need to buy gold and silver, you need to get out of the way of the dollar. But look at the states that are doing that, just that. There was one of the senators from Idaho said it best. He stood on the Republican floor, on the House floor, and said, we need to allow our constituents to do the same thing that the central banks around the world are doing, and that is to get out of the way of the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve. That's what we need to do. And unfortunately, I think there's nothing that this country can do short of immediately stopping the ridiculous spending. Well, that's not going to be very politically favorable. And you're talking pitchforks and fire. But that's the only way out. I mean, you have to stop spending. We have to stop spending money we don't have. We're giving hundreds of billions of dollars all around the world, and we're borrowing money to do it. We're borrowing money to pay the interest on our debt. And as rates continue to rise, it only gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So if a politician were honest, they would say we need to go through a period of time of great strain and belt tightening and perhaps a massive depression. And because there's no way out of it, because we have exploited this debt-based system too much. So right. I don't know. I guess all I would simply say is that people need to, I would, number one, minimize all debt, especially variable rate debt. I would pay myself first. I would put money, even if it was $10 in a jar, every single 2 weeks or whenever I could. I would buy an ounce of silver or I'd buy some gold as often as I possibly can, because it is wealth. And when you see the biggest money in the world, the central banks, who are not just the biggest money, but the most well-informed, they know the playbook. When you see them buying more gold than at any time in history, ever, that should be all you need to know, that the most well-funded and well-informed, sophisticated traders on the planet, who are always leading the pack, that's who you follow. Don't do as they say, do as they do. What do? You get the heck out of the way. You become a contrarian, or you will be a victim, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great advice, because that's exactly what I've been preaching and telling people: get out of debt. Lessen your liabilities. And look into the precious metals.
A 4% mortgage sounds great right now, right? On a
Yeah.
$500,000 home until you lose your job.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Minimizing debt is really very, very important. Letting the laws of compounding work for you instead of against you. Yeah. And I don't care what people say. Well, I got a 3% mortgage. Why would I pay it off? It's just stupid. No, it's not stupid. Yes, in a traditional sense, you can earn more money in treasuries than you can paying off your debt. But there's risk in treasuries. For the first time in 45 years, gold is considered less volatile than treasuries. Treasuries are considered volatile. The
Yeah.
bond market since 2020, the 10-year bond market, 10-year treasury and 30-year will go down in history as the worst bond disaster in history. It is the worst bond bear market ever. They've
Hmm.
lost half their value in 3 years. So, when something is considered to be stable and secure and loses half its value in 36 months, you tell me, and so I think that means rates went up. So yeah, paying off your debt, if you can afford to, I'm
Yeah.
all for it.
Yeah.
Get rid of your mortgage. Who cares that it's at 3%?
Yeah.
You'll find that it's much easier to get ahead when you start from a standpoint of no debt burden. And it's also very liberating. You'll sleep better at night. If you have the ability, God willing, to do these kinds of things, do it. Be unconventional. Unconventional times call for unconventional ideology and thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife's been in accounting for, oh my goodness, 30 something years. And anytime she counsels somebody, she always tells them, get a budget, start working things out, see where your money's going. And I think a lot of Americans are in just a free for all, let's just do it. And not looking at the times and not listening to people as yourself and saying, look, I need to cut back. I don't need to be as wild as the world seems to be and the government seems to be, and be prudent for sure. I was noticing gold's on the move. It's gone up past couple weeks since last time you and I talked. What's going on with gold and silver?
They're still massively undervalued. I think the world is realizing that, here again, treasuries are now more volatile than gold. It's not a safe haven asset as much as it once was. Central banks are on a buying spree. People understand the big money is positioning. You have massive central bank purchasing using the Western suppression of paper markets to run cover for it. That massive buying is keeping gold elevated and going higher, even in a period of time when interest rates are rising. The difference this time is that who wants to buy treasuries in the country that is as unstable as ours is? Normal times, when you see rates going up higher and higher and higher, people would buy treasuries because they're safe with no risk, safest investment in the world, supposedly with no risk. You're getting a return where gold doesn't pay any. But I think people understand that where we are going, return on is not as important as return of. And I think that's the whole premise here. We are seeing a shift from debt instruments and paper assets to tangibles, to commodities in your physical possession, which eliminates all counterparty risk. And to me, counterparty risk will be a buzz phrase that will be looked upon with great disdain in the future, because in this environment, it becomes harder and harder and harder for counterparties to perform in an interest rate rising environment where the economy is slowing, cost of money is going higher, the availability of credit is disappearing. Counterparty risk will explode. And when you talk about gold and silver, they are assets that maintain no counterparty risk. In other words, they are what they are. It doesn't matter what you say they are. That's what they are. This is what the world says they are. So when you talk about a dollar bill, what's it worth? Well, it's worth the value of the dollar in the global world, or the ability of the United States government or the Federal Reserve to make good on it. There is risk there. How about your life insurance policy? Sure, its value is there until the life insurance company goes bankrupt, etc.
Right.
There's counterparty risk in all these assets we own, but gold and silver are some of the only assets that maintain no counterparty risk. The biggest risk is someone steals it from you. It's about the only risk. Short of that, I would argue you have a far greater chance of being ripped off and stolen from by the system, and inflation and hyperinflation and taxation, which is this inflation is a hidden tax. Taxation will increase right in your face. Then you will someone knowing you have gold or silver and trying to burglarize your home. So, to me, it's just never been more important. And I think the world is becoming a scarier, more dangerous place that requires more thinking about how you deploy your capital, less reliance upon interest and return, and more upon stability and safety and minimization of counterparty risk and liability.
So that's a safe place to be in precious metals for
I would
sure.
think so. And it's wealth.
Yeah.
It's been wealth for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
And as we said last time, through every pandemic, 2 world wars, Great Depression, hyperinflation, you name it, everything the world's ever thrown at it, it's wealth.
Yeah.
Go all the way back to the Bible, go kings and queens and pharaohs and emperors all owned it. They didn't call their gold dealer to buy it. They owned it because it was immutable wealth. And all of civilization through all of time has agreed to that. So, it's not an archaic relic of days gone by. It is something that the biggest money in the world is in great pursuit of right now. And they are using suppressed rhetoric and suppressed prices um, to run cover for it. And
Yeah.
by the time people wake up and say, oh, geez, what do I do now? That's when it gets very difficult to find gold and silver, or the race will be on and it will happen in a blink of an eye. It'll disappear because
Yeah.
the amount of money that's out there, gold and silver represent but a pebble in a sandbox of wealth. And, good luck finding that pebble when you drop it into the sandbox of money. And there's so much money out there that's been created in such a small market in gold and silver in comparison. There's only been $5 or $6 trillion worth of gold mined since Genesis, since the beginning of time. And, we printed twice that amount in the last 4 years. So, yeah, you're talking about, and most of that gold is held by central banks, or it's already in coins or bars or whatnot. There's a very little bit when you talk about the availability. And silver is even a much smaller market. So when you talk about protecting, too many people need to see with their eyes before they validate the reason to buy it. That's like blowing up your life raft as the boat is sinking. No, 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 no. You blow up your life raft, you hope you never need to use it.
Right.
It's a firearm, right? You
Right.
never, ever want to take someone's life. You never, ever, ever want to use a gun. But what happens when your window breaks at 4 a.m. and it's your family or that person? Are you going to use it? I don't know. That's a personal decision. But the point is the same thing. These are things you hope you don't ever have to do.
Yeah.
But when you're confronted with self-preservation, what do you do? And I think that's the moral of the story here, is that you hope for the best, you prepare for the worst. And if you never end up using your gold and silver, you have a legacy that you can pass on to your family, that in the year 3000, long after the bills in our wall are hanging from a frame in the Smithsonian as an example of what was, it'll still be immutable wealth. And that's why I own it. And I hope I never need to use it. I know my kids will have it. And it really is something that makes me feel good in a world of great uncertainty. To me, I have much more conviction that gold and silver will last whatever is thrown at us next, much more so than the current system we find ourselves residing in.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk to you a little more about that in a minute about gold. I was listening to Michael Oliver, and he was, I'm sure you know of him very well. He was mentioning that, maybe in the next 60 days or something, he doesn't really thought too many predictions, except he did get the stock market crash in 1987, right? But, in 60 days, we could be looking at gold at, $600 and higher. I'm sure you've already heard this.
I mean, silver.
And silver, and so everything's
gold right now is just under 2,000. So you said 600 on gold. So yeah, I mean, gold, who knows how high it goes. And Michael's whole theory is momentum analysis. So he is saying that the momentum is building for the accumulation of gold globally.
Yeah. So my point of bringing that out was, if you're listening today and you're kind of on the fence, you don't know what to do, I think now's the time to get involved. Wouldn't you say so? And it's not a sales pitch. I mean, today's the day to do something about it if you can.
So, yes, what am I trying to say here? I think that you buy gold and silver because it is wealth and because there are very scary times ahead. You don't buy it hoping that it goes higher. It is a pullback. It has been a pullback
up and down
over the last several months. It's found strength again here now, but you buy gold, and I am less discriminant on the price and more thinking about the future and about what the environment looks like. And more to my point, I think you buy it because it's available. It's here.
Right.
So, yeah, it's just one of these deals where I think that I think it's as good of an opportunity to buy gold as we've seen in a very long time, because the premiums have come down at a time when the world has gotten worse off and the biggest money on the planet continues to accumulate. So yes, price is going to be a factor for most people. I get that. I'm not trying to
Right.
sidestep that, but
Right.
it's not my primary concern actually, and I don't think it should be anyone's. Yes, you want to get the best price, but
Sure. Sure.
I think you have to have a certain portion of protection in your portfolio. If you are cost averaging, if you already have your core position, sure, you have the luxury of waiting for pullbacks. If you don't, go back to the home protection. You buy a gun, you come to the grips with, yeah, I'm a pacifist, but you know what? I'm scared. You buy a gun, you do not wait for bullets to go on sale before you buy a box of bullets to protect your
Exactly.
family.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can buy some after you've already got that first box of bullets, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think the same thing is true here, that the price is look, gold hit all-time highs last week in the second and third largest economies in the world in Japan and China and Japan, so respectively. You're talking about the majority of the world, gold is at all-time highs already.
Yeah.
It's just that the dollar is so strong that it blurs what's really going on with gold.
Yeah. Yeah, my point, I guess, was, the affordability for people, not that you're trying to, make a buck or whatever, is, if you wait and it stays at a high, you're not going to be able to afford it. And I think a lot of people look at it. There's such a misunderstanding of precious metals, and they get so scared. And I know I'm speaking to somebody right now. They get so scared of making that decision because I've had this fiat currency in my hand all my life, and you're wanting me to trade it in for this, that what is this? The gold, the silver, what have you. And what I'm saying is, if you don't do it now, you may not be able to do it.
You won't be able to do it, and the price will be prohibitive, and the availability will be gone. Right now, if you take the entire gold matrix, the entire economic matrix, and take everyone from Joe and Jane Sixpack to the Harvard Endowment Fund, and give it an allocation to gold, it's 0.5% or less. So no one owns any, and it's been challenging to source it for people for the last 4 years. What happens when 10% of the public, or the public, wants 5% ownership in gold? That's what, a 10 times increase in demand.
Yeah,
it's gone just like that. And there's so much money out there. What if an NBA player like Stephen Curry, who makes 35 million a year, says, I don't care what my advisor says, I'm buying gold and silver. You get a couple of very wealthy guys, Bill Gates, very wealthy centimillionaires, decide to buy things in a matter of one day, the entire industry's blown up. And I'm serious. It's flush right now, but flush is relative when you talk about the amount of money that's out there.
I agree.
And I had a meeting yesterday with one of the wealthiest families in the United States. I'm not going to mention any names, but I was at her house for hours. And I mean, it's a whole different level. What a wonderful person. But the amount of wealth that this family has amassed is extraordinary. And I mean, it's to the point where it's almost hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
And she could blow up the whole industry herself if she wanted to. Yeah. And I mean that she could take, the inventory of several companies in one day. I may have 70, 80 million of inventory in stock. So say there's 10 companies with that. So, $700-800 million. And you're talking the majority of the inventory in the retail market. Goodbye. $1 billion. Goodbye. Now you got to wait 3 weeks for the new stuff, but
door shut.
Yeah. And that's how fast it happens. So, I mean, I'm not trying to sensationalize it. It's happened repetitively over the last several years, and there's never been anything quite as dynamic as what we see in front of us right now.
Yeah. No, your point is perfect, because from my point of view, and I've been trying to convey to people, there's a convergence of things happening. We're getting hit from every area as we began the whole conversation. It's a bombardment, and I think doors are going to shut that are open now. And if you don't make moves and be smart now, you may never be able to go back to it. I mean, we're never going back to what used to be. That's over.
I agree.
Leave it to Beaver and all that. Yeah, leave it with Beaver.
I like those times. I like
I do too.
I like Wally and the Beav and Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver. I liked all of that. I liked the time before these darn things, and I liked the time that was simpler. But unfortunately, we're not going back. You're right. So I think the people that will survive and maybe even thrive, if there's an opportunity, will be those that
Yeah.
Acknowledge, confront, pull their head out of the sand,
Yeah.
and confront it and embrace it and prepare for it and hope you're wrong.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that happens if you have a gun with bullets, some food, some water, some batteries, some gold, some silver, some small bills, cash on hand, and you're prepared?
That's
Nothing.
right.
Not a darn thing. But if you're right, well, then you may just have, done a lot more to make your life better than your neighbors will have. And I hate to even speak this way. I come from nothing. My company comes from nothing. My dad's middle name is Franklin, and my dad's middle name is Miles. His best friend Franklin, who lent us $60,000 to start this company in a one-room office 34 years ago, and we just
Wow.
eclipsed 9 billion in sales. This country has done more for me and my family than I could ever repay.
Yeah.
And I am a patriot, and I am proud to be an American. But I am terribly saddened, much more so than what's happening with the mismanagement of the dollar and our world opinion, by what's happening here at home. And I think we lack the unity and the strength to rally, maybe when we need to most. So yeah, I think it's at this point, every man or woman for themselves at first. You can only save the world one person at a time, starting with yourself. Get your house in order. Kind of like when they're doing that thing on the airplane, when if the things come down, put your mask on first before you help others. You got to do that. You got to help yourself first, and then go out and help your friends and your family if they'll listen. Chances are most of them won't, not until it becomes too obvious. And that's why so few people ever succeed in investing.
Yep.
Because they wait until the acknowledgement rather than understand the fundamentals and connect the dots. And you do that the right way, you won't lose, even if you're wrong.
Right. That's great words of wisdom. I couldn't have said it any better, and that's absolutely what needs to happen. Before we go, you mentioned just putting a little money away here and there, and then buying silver once in a while. Guys, those that are watching, listening, you feel like, man, there's no way I can get involved in these things. Yeah, there is. Do a little bit here and there, plan it out. Cut back here, cut back there, and before you know it, you'll have some things as a hedge of protection for your life. And man, Andy, it's been a great part two, man.
We can also do IRAs. If you have an IRA,
Yeah.
we can convert it to a precious metals IRA.
Awesome.
And then you fill it with gold and silver. And through distribution, which is a taxable event, or liquidation, you can actually take possession of the metal. So if you don't have the cash on hand, but you have an IRA that's, not really doing so well, especially if you're nearing the retirement age, switch it to a precious metals IRA and fill it with gold and silver and start taking distribution of it. So there are other things that we can help with. And this is why I would ask people, rather than going to our website automatically, milesfranklin.com, send us an email at info@milesfranklin.com. Request a more updated price sheet, which is a much better price than you'll find. Much better prices than you'll find on our website. I try to keep that a little bit more private. And any questions you may have, precious metals IRAs, or anything we've talked about here today, and we will get back to you. We have 14 brokers that are very, very, very adept at answering these questions, myself included. Many of them have been on Wall Street, have very, very distinguished careers prior to working with me, and many of them have been with me for 20 plus years. So we have the ability to answer your questions the right way, focusing mostly on you and the client's ability to succeed in this, and giving them the right advice, showing them pitfalls. That's why we've never had a customer complaint in 34 years. This February will be 34 years, so we're almost there. But look, I appreciate the opportunity to come here. I'd love to come back again. This is a very fluid situation. I'm sure there'll be lots to talk about.
Sure.
But again, bottom line, you buy gold and silver because it's wealth. Yep. And not because it's an investment. And that's important. It might be one of the only insurance policies that you can collect on without there being a calamity. You can sell your gold and silver, even if there isn't a car crash or a house burning and whatever it may be. So it's insurance, but it's also wealth, and it's there when you need it. And if not, you pass a legacy on to your family that has been considered wealth for 5 millennia. And I don't think that'll change anytime soon.
That's awesome. Andy Schectman, info@milesfranklin.com. They get with you more information, about how to do all that good stuff, right?
Sir, absolutely. And I look forward to coming back on you with you again. In the
Yeah,
meantime, I hope you and yours and everyone out there in this crazy world we find ourselves in stays well.
yep.
And we'll look forward to picking up where we left off.
We will. We'll get together again. Guys, bless you. Thank you so much, Andy.
God
Thank you.
bless.